What's up? What's up? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. We got a fun episode for you guys today, and then tomorrow we'll be doing our 2025 year in review, New Year's episode. So looking forward to that one. Looking forward to this one, and then in the new year, me and Robbie the Fire Bernstein are coming to a city near you. Go to comicdavesmith.com. We'll be traveling the country, bringing stand-up comedy shows all around. In January, we will be in Philadelphia, one of the best comedy towns in this country. And then we'll be out in Portland, Oregon, taking over, kicking all the lefties out, and we're making it a libertarian paradise this year in Portland. Give us some time, but we'll get back to you. comicdavesmith.com. Go check that out. How you doing today, Rob?
I like it. Portland needs a cleansing, so that's a good area for if we're going to start somewhere and really showcase what we can do. Portland's a good one. Episode 2 of Porching is out tonight, 8 p.m. We'll go live, and it's like a full 20 minutes, so it's like nearly a TV show, self-produced, all put together by yours truly. So please go give that a watch. A lot of work went into it. And then New Year's, I'm doing it in Jersey with Sam Tripoli, opening for that guy. So if you're out in Jersey, come hang out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sam's great. That'll be a great show. Rob Bernstein and Sam Tripoli right here in Jersey. That's what I like to say. All right. So I wanted to spend today's show, or at least a lot of it, on this very, very interesting story coming out of Minnesota, which is evidently the capital of Somalia. And it is look, I guess I should say, there's been, this is not a brand new topic. There's been a lot of talk about the level of fraud in Minnesota for a while now. But this guy, Nick Shirley, really kind of shook up this whole conversation. And so I almost for people who are not aware of the story, maybe just like giving a little bit of background here. But there's what's really interesting about this is that it's not just the fraud itself. It's also like this Nick Shirley guy apparently seems to have not just uncovered a pretty massive fraud, or maybe wouldn't say uncovered, but demonstrated. Maybe some other people would be like, could claim the first ones to have ever talked about this. But he's a guy who is essentially, I think, like an independent guerrilla journalist kind of type guy who makes YouTube videos. And he's not only like exposing what is apparently a huge government fraud, but then also just implicitly is like a huge indictment of the corporate media in general, law enforcement, both federally and at the state level and locally. And it's just very interesting. He's got this 45-minute expose where he goes around and looks at a bunch of different daycares and where there's all these, which is a policy that Tim Walz, running for vice president, was championing, that they've done all this amazing funding of daycares in his home state. And in fact, this was his promise that him and Kamala Harris were going to bring this to the on the national level. And now there's the last I checked, 115 million people have watched this video. And so I don't know, it's fascinating on many levels. It exposes how, like there's newspapers out there in Minnesota, there's local TV news shows, and there's all types, as we know in this country, of federal or national news apparatuses. I should say national, although kind of federal. And none of them have done an expose like this, where they got 115 million people to see, oh my God, look at what's going on here. Now, I have seen some pushback on the expose that this kid, the 23-year-old, this kid put together, but none of them really make it go away. Like they were, or maybe I should do a better job, like Rob, explaining what it is. But essentially, the expose starts with this guy named David, who basically says he's like working in downtown Minneapolis, and he just notices that there's all these daycares opening up all over the place, but there's never any kids. And so he kind of starts like going like, hey, what's going on here? And then he notices like these other things, like there's these government like transportation shuttles, but they're never driving anyone. It's always just a Somali guy driving them. And so in this thing, they go around to all these different daycares, and there are public records, so you can see the grants that they're getting. Like this place got $800,000. This place got $1.5 million. This place, and none of them have any kids. None of them will tell you what they're doing. Their windows are blacked out. One of them, in a quite funny twist, was, what was it called, Rob? But it was
the leaning center.
The leaning center,
or like learning, or whatever it was. It was just misspelled.
It was the word learning without the R in there. So that, I mean, which was particularly funny. Now, I did see people pushing back that they were like, no, the reason why there's no kids in that one is because it's already been shut down by the state. The issue is that, okay, they still got a grant this year and they still got a grant last year. And so like if the state is giving out taxpayer dollars in the millions to a place that they just have to shut down because it's so bad anyway, that's still a pretty big scandal. How the idea that you could put leaning or leering, maybe the N was missing, whatever, I think it was leering instead of learning, you know, that already is pretty damning. So anyway, I don't know, Rob, maybe you could start off with any thoughts that you have, because there's a lot of different angles to go down here.
Well, I sure hope we don't end up being a bunch of suckers and it turns out that he just went out on like Christmas week, and so it happens to be that all these places were closed. Doesn't appear to be that way. But I remember, I should do more of this. This was early Run Your Mouth, right after Charlottesville, and we defeated a Nazi uprising in this country with urine. Really, really a remarkable story. The week later, no one's going to remember this, but someone had planned a like free speech rally in Boston, and the media went nuts as if it was supposed to be a second Charlottesville.
Oh yeah.
And this was such an eye-opening incident for me. Was I got the kid, who was a nice college kid, who had organized the event, to come on my podcast. And I got the firsthand story from this kid about how the news and media just decided that his event was something that it wasn't, portrayed it that way in the media. Everyone went nuts that it was supposed to be some white nationalist get-together, and then the thing got shut down. And I was like, how, at the time, my podcast was like 200 listeners, maybe? I was like, how am I the one person who's actually talking to the source on this? Literally the only one person in the country that decided to actually talk to the kid that organized it, and then you just find out the entire thing is a facade and the entire thing is fabricated. So there's kind of two takeaways here. One is just how much of a bubble of like fake information we're living under because the media just doesn't cover some topics and overtreats others, and also just like the fact that we live in a world without real journalism. I mean, this story was just here for the taking. 60 Minutes didn't want to do a piece. Yep. There wasn't Fox News didn't want to make Tim Walz look bad. Not one person thought to just go around and be like, oh, let's go look at all the businesses that got these grants and see if they're even there. The fact that this was just there for the taking, and who knows how many other stories are like this where it's just so blatantly obvious and just so showcases. Wait, the governor was just handing out checks and no one thought to be like, hey, there's nothing here? Like, how do you even fraud? How is it that easy to defraud the government? It's quite a shocking thing, and you know, I don't think the news organizations will ever learn. But hopefully, YouTube keeps putting it. You know what I mean? Like, hopefully, there's enough market returns for this kind of stuff that a lot of people just start getting out there.
Yeah, you know what? That's right. All of that's exactly right. And look, I mean, if there is something where like if there's something that this guy got wrong in the video or whatever, it's like, well, okay, well then point that out. And like if he's, but it does seem that like even just from the research I've been able to do, like the grants are real, the places are real. In fact, very bizarrely, there was one of them where, and this has been verified by a bunch of people, where the phone number led back to Tim Walz's office, which is hilarious. Very strange. And like, look, I'm not even saying that means anything. Like maybe there's some other explanation for why that would be. I highly doubt that like Tim Walz also thought, I'm going to get in on this and like open up one of my own and take grant. That seems like it would be too sloppy for anyone who's even gotten to the level of governor. Like they have more sophisticated ways to extort money than that. But that's a big question. What the hell is going on here? And one thing I thought that was very interesting is that, and it really does show something about the time we live in. So I go, because I was just curious today. So I checked like almost all the news sites of just like the big corporate news sites like I went to NBCnews.com, Reuters, and CNN, and a whole bunch of others. None of them had it in the top story. None of them. And you know that part of that is just that, like, they don't want to allow some 23-year-old guy with a YouTube channel to be dictating what the news of the day is, because that's already kind of like a loss for them, no matter what side of the thing you're on. But at the same time, it's got 115 million views on it. The thing's been viewed by more than all of you guys combined. And so, like, I don't know, there's just a very interesting dynamic to that. Like the new media landscape we live in, we're like, all right, guys, you can ignore this. Then I understand the calculation you're making. Like, we let him seem like he's the big dog if we get, but the calculation is wrong because now you're just irrelevant. You're not talking about the thing that everyone wants to talk about. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Crowd Health, an amazing company that I've been telling you about for many years. What if you could get healthcare for under $100 a month? Well, now that is a reality. Introducing the Black Swan membership, the healthcare alternative for those who want autonomy over their care, their costs, and their lifestyle. For just $95 a month, you get a team of expert bill negotiators, access to low-cost prescriptions, lab testing, and a curated database of high-quality, low-cost doctors vetted by Crowd Health. There's no insurance middleman. There's no network dictating your care, just you in the driver's seat. And if a major Black Swan event hits, you cover the first $15,000 and the crowd steps in to help fund the rest. It's like the freedom we used to have before Obamacare turned healthcare into a bureaucratic nightmare. So if you're ready to end 2025 on your terms, use the promo code POTP at joincrowdhealth.com and you'll get the first 3 months for just $80. That's right. Kick off the new year with healthcare that puts you first. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out. Take your power back. This is how we win. Visit joincrowdhealth.com and use promo code POTP today. All right, let's get back into the show.
And I think this is such an important story because I think people need to realize it's real nice when you sit at home and someone tells you, hey, government can step in and we can provide these important social services. And I'm sure that this is not the only story in this country. I mean, I think you could look at California homelessness and how much money has gone to that and how much homelessness it's solved. Mm-hmm. But this is the socialist pitch is, listen, we're going to borrow from future generations. We're going to forcibly take money from wealthy individuals. And as long as you allow us to distribute the money, we're going to make sure that important services are taken care of for you. And how good are they at actually making sure that these services are done? You're the ones who are pitching, hey, we're going to govern. We're the best at doling out these resources, and the things that you need, we're going to oversee it. That's the pitch. That's the job that you anointed yourself as being great at. So if you got someone like Tim Walz, who is all for social services, it's no excuse of, oh, I wasn't able to execute on them well. Even if he was not in on the grift, just the idea that you're going to step in and go, listen, I'm the best at this. I'm going to take money from the private market. I'm going to forcibly redistribute it. And that's how we're going to make sure that kids and other social services are taken care of. And then you see, oh, they're actually really bad at this because it's not what's important to them. What's important to them is inserting themselves so that they can have control.
Yeah, that's right. Well, look, and that's exactly right. And then and let's just add a little to that. Because when you say they're not good at this, it's not as if we're just saying, like, you know, like, let's say there's just two sandwich shops and one of them makes a really good sandwich and the other one just doesn't make that good of a sandwich. Like, they're better at this than the other. It's like the government is bad at this for inherent structural reasons. There's a reason why socialism does not work. And one of the major factors, right, is that, look, even if you like, if you remember, I don't know, you ever read Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, Rob, but it was years ago that I read it. But it's like one of the most famous economic books ever. But it's like where he coins the terms like the invisible hand of the market. And he talks about how he writes like in really beautiful language. So it's like, not by the benevolence of the butcher does he provide meat for the community. And he's making the point that, like, look, there's obviously people have their own self-interest. The butcher is trying to support his family. It's not just that he cares that you eat, but the way he supports his family is by getting you your meat. And if he gives you really shitty meat, you're probably not going to come back to him. And therefore, he's got to do at least a decent enough job of giving you something, or he's not going to be able to. So the point is that the market has this like ability to move incentives in a way that like you're actually incentivized to provide something of value to your customers for your own selfish interests. But we don't rely on saying that like the guy at the auto shop is motivated by the fact that he really just loves cars and really wants to see people driving cars. You know what I mean? You go, no, he's got a family and he's got bills to pay and he has his own self-interests, but he's incentivized to do a decent job so people keep coming back to him. So he has customers and he can make more money. And then the market has a cleansing mechanism. The cleansing mechanism is the profit and loss system. Now, it's not perfect, but it at least does somewhat of a job of like, if you're just doing a terrible job in providing your service, there's a good chance you're going to go out of business. Now, the government sector, the public sector that you're talking about, which again, the key difference between the private sector and the government sector is that the private sector is based around voluntary interactions and the public sector is based around forced interactions, right? Like, every relationship you have in your life, every job you do, assuming you're not a government employee, but everyone here, like me, you, Rob, and Natalie, we're all here because we voluntarily agree to be here. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's thrilled with every aspect of everything every day, but like you could leave if you want to. No one's holding a gun to your head. You're here because you've agreed to be here, myself included. This is true for almost every relationship you have, and like your friendships, your relationships, you could leave if you want to, but you choose not to. And if there's ever a situation where that's not the case, then something criminal is going on, like something where someone could go to jail over that. Government is the big exception to that. You're forced to pay your taxes or you go to jail. You're forced to comply with regulations or they shut down your business. You're forced to obey laws or you go to jail. And so there is no cleansing mechanism. If, like you said, with California, if they're saying, hey, we're going to tax the people a bunch of money for a new program to solve the homelessness problem, if they don't solve the homelessness problem at all, the taxpayer has no ability to say, well, then we're not going to pay for this anymore. They have to. They go to jail if they don't pay for it. And so what you end up having is that the government relies on you believing that the people at the top are motivated by something higher than individual self-interest, like some type of benevolent, desire for justice and equality, which that's not really how human beings are built. We don't expect that. We would never buy that from anyone in the private sector. And then also they have absolutely no cleansing mechanism. And so the whole thing, it's not that there happen to be these areas of waste, fraud, and abuse. The whole thing is fraudulent by its very nature. By its whole nature, the whole thing is fraudulent. And so, when people make these pitches, like this was one of Tim Walz's major pitch during the presidential campaign. In fact, Rob, I think I would say policy-wise, this was his central issue that he ran on. Here, let's play that clip. I sent that to you. Rob had a couple good ones that he sent too in the email, but I sent the one of him in the VP debate. Let's do that one first. Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
It's so importantly hilarious to point out that part of the Democrats' pitch the last time, listen, Donald Trump, he's also a democratic socialist, and he's terrible, okay? But, there's a war of ideas going on, and the Democrats were trying to play the card of Donald Trump's a big old meanie, and we care more about people. And yep. Tim Walz was definitely one of those characters who was playing that card of, no, it's about compassion for other individuals. And it goes, all right, well, how compassionate were you to the United States taxpayers that you might have sent as much as $1 billion to Somalia? Where's the compassion there? The point is you're giving us this fake pitch of that you're the nice guy and that you're going to provide social services, but you're actually too inept to do so.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. All right, here, let's play.
Past paid family and medical leave. You have a child, you And I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
So obviously this was not just about daycare, but he did get that in there as well. And look, Rob, this is the thing, right? It's easy. It's always easy for the socialist or whatever, or the person advocating government intervention to just point themselves as, yeah, I'm giving more, and this will help you, and this will be so wonderful. And then you see it when it actually comes into practice, and it looks a little bit different than the rosy picture that they end up telling you about. Why is that? You know, I mean, look, to me, I guess with all these economic questions, and this is partly why I fell down the Mises Rothbard rabbit hole, is just that like I just love logic, like I just love logic and truth, and so like you just when you look at these things, you're like you could just like reducto absurdum a lot of them. Like if this is such a superior model, then why aren't we applying this to everything? Like the logic of these things is communism. Like again, if you can provide better daycare for families by the state doing it, but if the system of taxing and spending the money is a better delivery mechanism for a service, then why wouldn't we do this with all services? Why like he said, this is the most important one. You know, the people who take care of your kids or your parents, the most important thing. Like, okay, but like eating food is really important too. Why shouldn't the government run all, you know what I mean? Like, why should not even Mom Donnie's plan of having a few city supermarkets? Why shouldn't all the supermarkets just be nationalized, be socialized? Like, so it's like none of this really makes sense to begin with. And the other thing, and this is kind of an aside from the whole topic, but isn't it like, I don't know, people get mad at me sometimes when I talk about this shit. And I don't mean to be like judgmental of other people. I know it's a sensitive subject because like people who put their own kids in daycare don't very much like when I talk about how daycare is kind of not the best thing. But I just don't think it is. And I don't know why, it's like almost in the same sense that, like people, someone like you could propose any type of welfare program and make it sound like you're the good guy, like, hey, I'm trying to help this guy who's really not doing very well. But then on some level, we also recognize that like it's kind of preferable for people not to be on welfare. Like able-bodied adults shouldn't be relying on other able-bodied adults to work and support them. If they're able-bodied adults, they should be supporting themselves. And then like, okay, well, what does that do? If you subsidize something, you tend to get more of it. So now you're getting more of a bad thing. And everybody knows this on some level. Like even progressives believe in economics when it's convenient for them. They support subsidizing green energy because you get more green energy if you subsidize something. They support taxing cigarettes because people consume less of it when you tax something. But then if you say, hey, that also, those laws of economics, that if you tax something, you get less of it, and if you subsidize something, you get more of it, that also applies to employment and unemployment. And if you tax employment and subsidize unemployment, well, what are you going to get? You get less people working and more people not working. Likewise, if you subsidize daycare, you're going to get more people to send their kids to daycare. And why exactly is that good? Like, why exactly do I want government raising our babies? And we're talking about daycare here. We're not talking about 5-year-olds. You're talking about 6-month-olds. Like, why is it that we want that? Why should we root for that? Rob, when I lived in the Upper West Side, I remember talking to you about this, but when I lived in the Upper West Side, which I lived there when I first got married and we had our first child, and And by the way, I wasn't making like a ton of money back then. I was doing all right. I was doing decent for myself, but I wasn't like making a ton of money. But there were all types of, people in the Upper West Side. It's like everyone's kids are raised by nannies. And all these guys got money, And I always found that to be very bizarre. I found it to be a very weird thing about our culture. It's very different than almost every culture that's ever existed, where families, both nuclear and extended, would raise the kids. And I don't see why this is just in general, I don't see why this is good, that we should celebrate that. I don't know, your kids are being raised by Somali immigrants at daycare does not seem like a great idea to me. I think parents and families should raise their children. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Body Brain Coffee. When did being a man turn into taking 6 different pills before noon? Nobody wants another supplement routine. Nobody wants to rattle when they walk, but everybody drinks coffee. That's why I love drinking Body Brain coffee. It's premium coffee with testosterone-supporting ingredients already blended in. No pills, no powders, no weird chemicals, no weird taste. You drink 1 cup of coffee and you're done. Body Brain is built for men to naturally boost your testosterone, strength, drive, energy, and motivation. And here's the key. You don't need 3 cups. You don't need to stack it with other stuff. 1 cup of Body Brain is enough. You're already drinking coffee every day anyway. You might as well drink one that actually does something for you. I will tell you guys, I've been drinking Body Brain for months now. I feel great. I love the stuff. It's also a delicious coffee, and I'm a bit of a coffee snob. So definitely go check them out. Of course, it's the creation of my brother, Louis J. Gomez, and we are going to blow this thing up for him, but we're going to use my promo code so he always knows that it was the part of the problem audience that did it. That's what made Louis successful. It was us. BodyBrainCoffee.com is the site, and the promo code is Dave20. That will get you 20% off your entire order. BodyBrainCoffee.com, promo code Dave20 for 20% off your order. All right, let's get back into the show.
I've actually been recommending to all my friends with children that they try and find a local Somalian daycare because those have the best government funding. So if you're looking for top resources and what's been backed by the United States of America and endorsed, you got to find the local Somalian community, and that's where your kids' needs are going to be the most well met, thanks to government funding.
Yeah, I mean it's really, I don't know, but the whole thing is just so crazy. Anyway, back to
where else do you learn how to wield knives and take over villages and pillage other people? If you want to get ready for a post-inflation world with all these wars popping off, what you need is your kids to be exposed to some Somalian culture.
Dude, I said someone did I can't remember who it was. Sorry for not giving you credit, but someone did the meme where they're like, look at me. I am your daycare now. This really got me. I thought that was hilarious. But, I'll tell you, the numbers with the thing, like the numbers in terms of how much money that this guy is alleging, that's right, like they're claiming they found over $100 million in fraud. And then the guy who it was like built around his work, he estimated the number up to somewhere like 8 billion. Now, who knows? If that's true, this is a pretty goddamn gigantic scheme here. But I will say that I know, I'd have to do more research or like really look at the numbers to be like, is 8 billion plausible or whatever? But I do know that, I know that in New York City, and this was as of a few years ago, it was over for public schools. The bill was over $20,000 per student per year. So that's how much they were paying for school year. And maybe there's some expenses for like schooling that you don't have for daycare, but like there's a lot of kind of in the same ballpark. You're taking care of a kid all day. And, so if you think about the numbers, right? Like, so if you're paying 20 grand per student per year, a classroom of 20 kids represents 400 grand of taxpayer money, right? Did I do that right? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I'm not good at math, but I got that one right. But is at 400 grand a year. So that's one classroom could represent 400 grand. So like if you went to like a big high school, the numbers that you could come up with of like, well, I don't know how many classrooms would you have in a big high school? Like 30 or 40, I don't know, but I'm just saying like you could see where you could get to numbers in the multi-millions fairly quickly. So it's only, so like again, just throwing that out there for some kind of like point of reference. But yeah, while they while they sit here, like you said, Rob, which I think was one of the best points made so far, as you say, they act like they have all this compassion, but how about compassion for the taxpayer? Like, does that never come into the equation? You know, like it's almost like, this is why I love these guys always like to talk about, like even when, Elizabeth Warren talks about tax policy or something, or Bernie Sanders talks about tax policy. What do they always say, Rob? They always say every time, the billionaires, right? It's always, the billionaires pay their fair share, or something about a wealth tax or something about that. But like, they never seem to justify the actual existing income tax, which I don't know if you've noticed, Rob, doesn't just apply to billionaires. You know, like every goddamn trucker and plumber and waitress and secretary in this fucking country is paying a substantial amount of tax, you know? Like okay, maybe not every single one, but like the overwhelming majority of them are not only like paying income taxes on every paycheck that they get, but like it's a life-changing amount of money if they were allowed to keep that. You know what I mean? And it's just like the idea of like extorting, like at the threat of violence, because that's why people pay their taxes. We could run this experiment and say it's not a law anymore and see how many people still send in their taxes. But like at the threat of, we will throw you to jail, you force working class people who are already struggling because you've destroyed the money. So now you force working class people to give up huge portions of their income. And then you take that money and just give it away, to scam artists who are pretending to start a daycare. This just doesn't seem all that compassionate, Rob. It sounds a lot more compassionate than it looks when it's in practice, now doesn't it?
Well, it's going to make for a fine talking point at the next election cycle when these guys are out there pitching their social services. And you're like, all right, well, how do you actually plan on executing that? Because the last time $1 billion went to Somalia.
Yeah.
Here, and then you also have the compassion that brought all these people to the regions, that they could just seize American wealth through fraud and grift.
Well, yeah, that's right. Well, that's another point. We should get into that. But here, you know what? Let's first, Rob, you sent in the second email that Rob sent, Natalie, he sent 2 clips of Waltz praising the childcare reforms. Let's play those because they were good.
And then there's timestamps there because they were news pieces about these. And I guess what's funny is I would have loved to have seen the production team when Walls was putting this together. Just talk about how blatant the fraud is. At some point, someone had to be like, oh, we can't go to that daycare facility. There's no playground there. You understand, at some point in time, someone needed to figure out how to put together these puff pieces. And so they had to actually find him a school where the money had gone to and there were actual kids there.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, look, if what's being alleged in this expose is true, it is such an outrage if nobody goes to jail over this. But, what else is new there, Rob?
Together as part of the state's economic and our basic social well-being.
St. David's received $270,000 to equip classrooms in central Minnesota. The executive director at the center says this meets an urgent need.
This deed grant is critical in creating 126 new child care slots slated to open next spring.
The grants are expected to create more than 2,000 spots for child care across the state.
Well, yeah, wonderful. Wonderful job there, Tim Waltz.
And you've got one more of him talking about this new expanded policy. And because even pre-COVID, there isn't enough resources in childcare, and that's why he's running with the new program to make sure that more cash is available. That's the next clip.
Is proposing another infusion of cash, $56.6 million spread out among thousands of providers. Family providers could get up to $1,200 per month. Centers up to $8,500 per month.
The child care situation was at a crisis point before COVID in Minnesota and across the country. But what these grants are meant to do is to offset the added cost of the protections in these child care centers.
The proposal still needs legislative approval. For Julie, it's a relief.
There you go. This was his initiative. He's out there telling you, everybody, hey, we need more money for childcare, and he just created an opportunity for fraud because he's actually not good at governing. And so it seems like they didn't do the basic to make sure that money wasn't just being wasted on fraud and abuse.
Yeah. And, it's something that's one of the things that's so infuriating about all of this is that, and, I know I've talked about this before on the show, but it really is like the great fraud of like feminism and monetary policy, and like how they're intersected, to borrow a leftist word. But so as most people I think know, right? But the overwhelming numbers of women entering the workforce really happened in the 1970s, and that doesn't. That might feel like a very long time ago to young people, but it's not that long ago. This is like 10 years before I was born. Okay, don't make any old jokes. Maybe it is a long time ago. But but before that, you be kind of hard pressed to find this being like a political discussion about like, oh, we have a real issue with child care, like who's going to take care of the children, because like mothers took care of the children. That was kind of the way it had worked, and had worked that way for like I think about 500,000 years. But so like that's and then all the way for all of time before that too. But I don't think you're looking at modern human beings really, or what science would call humans. But anyway, but so if you think about it, right, like in the 50s and in the 60s, there's like almost every family was like my family was, or my grandfather worked in a factory and his wife didn't work. That was just the expectation, that if the man had a job, he could afford to own a house, send a couple kids to college, have a couple cars, play poker with his buddies on Saturday, live a reasonable life. His wife could go shopping sometimes. And they weren't wealthy or anything like that, but they were just where everyone was, working class people. Then in the 70s, you had this huge move of women entering the workforce. But also in the 70s is when we go off the gold standard and just start printing money like crazy. Okay, if you want to be technical, we started printing money like crazy before, and that's why we went off the gold standard, because our bluff got called. But then when we're off it, we really start printing money. And like, you might ask yourself, well, wait a minute. If the dad was working and the mom didn't work, and then the mom went to work, shouldn't they have like twice as much money? Or shouldn't like maybe the wife would only have to work part-time and the dad could go down to working part-time, right? Like, why is it that that one full-time job got replaced by two full-time jobs? And the answer is because they destroyed the currency and things became more and more expensive, and you needed that. And now, fast forward to today, many people, many young couples, even forget the ones who have kids yet, right? But just young couples couldn't even fathom the idea of only one of them working. It's like, if only one of us was working, how the hell would we afford any type of life? Like, we're struggling with both of us working to afford a decent place to live. And so the inflation mixed with other, burdens of the government like taxation and regulation ends up making people much poorer. And then the government comes around, then these politicians come around and go, oh, here's the solution for it. Some social welfare program. Here's the solution. We'll pick up the cost of your child care. And then what does that turn into? Oh, you'll pick up the cost of your child care and give it to a whole bunch of fraudsters. And it's just infuriating when you watch the whole thing play out. Okay, a couple more interesting notes about this. And this, I'm not, make what you will of this. But did you see any of the stuff about? Look, I'm not alleging any crazy conspiracy here. But the woman who was like against this shit ended up murdered.
What?
Did you see that? And
you mean the one who was protesting the ICE thing?
No. The woman who was like in the here. Hold on, I'll pull it up.
The woman who's in the video yelling, "ICE is here! ICE is here!"
No.
Oh, okay.
No. There's a legislator. Okay, so hold on one second. Let me see this. Hold on, I have it up here.
Because that was a wildly hilarious liberal moment.
No. This is a separate thing. Okay, but there was one Democrat that voted to end healthcare for illegals in Minnesota, and evidently was also very against this whole scheme, who wound up murdered by this guy Vance Bolter, who happened to be an appointee of Tim Walz in some capacity. Now, make of this what you will. I haven't done enough research on this to have an opinion one way or the other, but there is a lot being made of this, and you never know. You never know how deep these scandals run and what these government thugs are willing to do to people over it. But that's one that is a big area of like, you'd want it to be investigated. Another thing about this that I must say, because this is I think it's I don't know, this is obviously relevant to the story, but Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, put out a long tweet in response to this. The same thing. By the way, still not enough to make it a top story at NBC News or CNN or Reuters or the Associated Press. But he said the FBI is aware of recent social media reports in Minnesota. However, even before the public conversation escalated online, the FBI had surged personnel and investigative resources to Minnesota to dismantle large-scale fraud schemes exploiting federal programs. So now, just saying, the FBI is saying, oh, yeah, we're aware of this and we're on it and we're investigating it, is an interesting response from the FBI. That being said, I don't know, Rob. I guess this is just my default position at this point, is like, okay, and what's the action that we're taking here, Kash? Because like, so far, don't get me wrong, I'm really, really impressed that the vice president and the FBI director tweeted about this. That's nice. That is nice. A tweet helps. It helps a lot. The thing is that every now and then, some of us plebs remember that you guys are in control of the fucking federal government, and we wouldn't mind if you actually did something about this. Like, what's going on, man? And, I guess the other angle here, Rob, which we haven't really touched on yet, but obviously there's something about this that's also related to the much bigger question of immigration. And like the idea that the Democrats really positioned themselves as the humanitarians for allowing this soft immigration policy where the country would totally just be racially and culturally and ethnically remade. And like, when you see stuff like this, it just makes you understand why people are skeptical of that, or more than skeptical of that, just blatantly opposed to it. The idea that it's an outrage for anybody to, defraud the taxpayer. But it sure does seem, Rob, am I crazy to say this? It sure does seem like more of an outrage for someone who just got here from Somalia to do that.
It's not just more of an outrage. I think it speaks to the risk factor of non-Americans that don't have the same allegiances or loyalties, and so their values. Yeah, and so like they're a little bit more ripe to pull a scam because they're just like, fuck these people. They're not me. I'm not them. These aren't my taxes. And so, it's a risk factor of people coming in who just want to, take resources and send them somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And like, it does seem that there's no, like, it seems to me what's going on here is that, and let me try to say this the right way. I'll say that the kind of, not just wokeism, like liberalism, political correctness, and the dynamic of kind of the left-wing protest culture, which has been a very real thing for many years. It does seem to have, like, the dam seems to have broken a little bit on it, but this was a real factor for many years, was that, people were just like, people felt really handcuffed to call this stuff out. And in fact, I don't know if it was Tim Walz, but it was some official in Minnesota, because they had the kid who broke this story or who did the expose on a Fox News show the other day. And the first thing they're saying is, oh, this is racist. This is racist because you're making it look like, you know, Somalis are ripping people off or something like that. And you're like, wait, so now that's the game? The game is that we gotta bring in people from a third world country, a country, by the way, that most Americans don't know we've been bombing the shit out of for 20 years for absolutely no legitimate reason. Donald Trump has broken the record. Honestly, this year he broke the record for the most strikes in Somalia. Honestly, we are one of the very, very few shows that has even talked about this issue. Like this is, I mean, like I'm not exaggerating. I think Dave DeCamp is the only one doing real journalism on this, and our show is one of a handful where, like the Scott Horton show and Dave DeCamp's show, Kyle Anzalove talks about it on his show. I bet Breaking Points has done something on it once or twice. Like Ryan Grimm, I'm sure has covered it, but like there's not much more than that. So we're bombing the crowd. We're very much exacerbating the refugee problem to begin with. It's been going on for 20 years there. And then so you got the government, our government, again, not even just against the will of the American people, like they don't even have knowledge of this for the most part. They don't even ever give a press conference about it, or if they do, very rarely. So they create this refugee crisis. Then they decide, against the will of the American people, to have this open border policy. You ship in millions of people from this third world country. Then they get fucking, Tim Walz has a policy where they get government ID and they can sign up and they can start defrauding the government. And then if one of the Americans happens to mention that they have a problem with this, like go, hey, this is crazy, these guys are, they get called a racist for saying something about it. Again, this is what drives people to take up radical political positions, and not like radical in the good way, like we do, where we're like for radical decentralization or radical liberty or something like that. But this is what leads to a really ugly reaction on the right wing, because this is just too intolerable. Like you can't do that. I mean, look, Minnesota. Minneapolis, I don't know. I'm 42 years old. When I hear the word Minnesota, in my mind, I still think of like the whitest place on earth. Like, I don't know, like just like, right? Like, isn't that what it's supposed to be? Now it's a playing ground for like Somali fraudsters. Why would we possibly support that? Who would support that? Why is that better? Someone explain it to me. And speak slowly so it makes sense. Why is that better? Why is it the anti-racist position to say that's better? You know, and it really reveals something about about this immigration policy itself. It shows something about like the nature of immigration, at least in this manner that we've had it. And it does show you like I've been saying this for a long time now, man. And I've argued with a bunch of other libertarians about this, and that it's like, look, dude, this immigration is a government program. Like Joe Biden's open borders are a government program. It is government is controlling the actual border itself, and they are opening it. The areas, at least in Texas, I know where there's some privately owned land that's right on the border. Government was actively preventing people from protecting their own private property, even threatening the local governments when they tried to stick up for those people. There is all types of UN money and NGO money that was given to those migrants who were coming up during the Biden years. And it's been alleged by Steve Miller that Biden was actually paying the migrants themselves from the Biden administration. I'm not exactly sure whether he's right on that or not. Wouldn't surprise me. And then there's all types of government assistance, government programs when they get here. And I guess in this case, government programs that can be abused. That's not the free movement of people. That's a government program to relocate people from other parts of the world here against the wills of the domestic population. That's not something a libertarian should defend. That's something a libertarian should be passionately opposed to. And just any normal person should be opposed to that. But then also, I think there's something to the fact that, like, look, Rob, if we're so crippled as a society, if we're so crippled by the fear of being perceived as bigoted, that like it's almost like down to a cartoonish level. Like if a black man, let's say a black man came over to like a little white mother and stole her baby out of her carriage and ran off, and you were like, stop that man. And someone went, you don't want to seem like a bigot. You know what I mean? Like if you're that paralyzed by this notion of anti-racism that you can't even like call out this direct thing right in front of you that's so obviously criminal and immoral, then then you just can't have immigration from that part of the world, man. You can't have both, because then you can't even set up the most basic like cultural demands. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, you could come here, but you got to not hate America. You got to learn English. You can't, I don't know, you can't deface public property or something like that. Like if you can't even say that, then we can't have the immigrants at all from that part of the world, because it doesn't work unless you could have some reasonable expectations. And like, I think it really does say something. I remember, I mentioned this on the show, Rob, but do you remember there was this, oh my God, it's just made my blood boil. Even though I recognize they're probably being coached in some way, but there was this big thing a couple years ago in New York City when they were really suffering through the migrant crisis, and the mayor, Eric Adams, flipped on the issue and was like, this is destroying our city. But so there was this, I think it was a hotel in Manhattan. Might have been like a rec center or something like that. I forget. But there was some building that the government had essentially paid the owners of the building a bunch of money to allow them to house these migrants there, because they didn't know what to do with them. And they gave them like a government issued stipend, so they could get like some food. They gave them government issued Metro cards so they could ride the subway. And so, they're getting housing and food and transportation covered by the taxpayer. And then there were just too many of them there. And so they were like, we got to move them out to this facility in Queens. They were in a facility in Manhattan, but they had to move out to a facility in Queens. And they protested. The migrants protested that it would be too inconvenient for them to have to move out to Queens. Now, they get their Metro card paid for, but, it's like a 40-minute ride on the subway. And now, what ultimately calmed me down is that as they were protesting, I was like, you can clearly see that this is not Mexican men. There's a white woman behind this, obviously. This is only a white woman would think to protest about this. But regardless, as these migrants are out there protesting, and you just think to yourself, and you're like, listen, I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Brooklyn. I lived in Manhattan for many years. No one I know can afford the neighborhood I grew up in. Maybe one of them. I genuinely think I might be the only person from my friend group who could afford to live where we grew up, which, by the way, was a working class neighborhood when I lived there. It was a working class to middle class to professional class, but like a firefighter owned a house next door to me. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like there now you got to be a millionaire to live in Park Slope, Brooklyn, or Fort, what's it called? I'm blanking on the names of the neighborhood. Fort Greene or Prospect Heights or any of those neighborhoods. You got to be a millionaire to live there now. Like, it's crazy. And so in that context, to see these migrants living off the taxpayer protesting that they have to move out to Queens, like, dude, everyone I know had to move out to Queens. It's just it's maddening. And there's gotta be, I think there is something almost like Freudian about this, where like if you're not like if you repress that, it's going to reemerge in a much uglier form. Like if you're not at least allowing people to say, like if you call someone a bigot for saying what I just said, or pointing at the fraud in Minnesota or something like that, if you think that doesn't make it go away, that drives it underground, and then it reemerges in a much, much uglier fashion. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is ExpressVPN. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a passcode on your phone. You're just making it insanely easy for anyone who steals your phone to also steal your whole digital life. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network in cafes, hotels, airports, etc., your online data is not secure. Any hacker on the same network can gain access to you and steal your personal data, your passwords, your bank logins, your credit card details, etc. And it doesn't take that much technical knowledge to hack somebody. All you need is some cheap hardware, and a smart 12-year-old could do it. Your data is valuable. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling personal info on the dark web, but ExpressVPN stops hackers from stealing your data by creating a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. VPN is easy to use. It works on all devices, phones, laptops, tablets, and more, so you can be secure on the go. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/problem. That's expressvpn.com/problem to find out how you can get up to 4 extra months for free. Again, the website is expressvpn.com/problem. All right, let's get back into the show. But this is just too, like, stuff like that. It's too intolerable. You couldn't ask any self-respecting man or woman to not be outraged by it.
And then speaking about just this warped liberal view, it was one of the moments I just started laughing out loud while I was watching it, but and it was what I was referencing before.
Mm-hmm.
But when this guy's going around to the businesses, outside of one of the businesses is just this middle-aged white lady who starts yelling, "ICE, close the doors, ICE is here, don't let them in." And just think about how warped this lady's perspective is, that she just decided that these people were wrong and she's not willing to hear them out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she even yelled shame at them, but she's just hoping to shame them away by yelling, doesn't want to listen, doesn't want to hear anything, just has decided these people are wrong. And by the way, maybe that area actually needs a little bit of ICE presence. Why are you just sitting there defending some foreign population that is there, and some of that foreign population is engaged in fraud, and some of it seems to be that they're a big enough voting bloc. I don't understand how that happens, but there's enough of a Somalian presence in Minnesota that apparently government officials don't really want to maneuver them that much and anger their base. All of that should be a problem for your average American. And now you actually got these people who are doing good work and exposing fraud and criminal elements that happen to exist in this group. There's no broader strokes. They're not discussing the immigration. They're literally just discussing fraud from these individuals and why is it so blatant and obviously at fake business fronts, and that no cop and no government official and no one's checking on this. That's it. There's no element of racial anything in there other than why is there this amount of fraud? But some lady's just going to yell at them because, she's just so bought into liberal worldview of if you're a white guy with the telephone in these areas, you must be here to displace this community, which is important to you. Why? Why is it so important that these people are able to be here?
Well, it's like, in a way, it's a very similar through line to a lot of what we're saying when we criticize these members of the Israel lobby, like Bari Weiss and Ben Shapiro and them. It's like, look, like, don't you have some base, just on the most basic level? Like, if you're going to be a part of something, then you have to be loyal to that thing. If it's like an important, like if you're going to be in a relationship, if you're going to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, then like, the most basic expectation is that they're loyal to you, that they're, they don't care about someone else's girlfriend more than they care about you because you're their girlfriend. And that's the foundation of a marriage, right? And a family. Like, it's not that I can't care about other families or other people, but I got to care about mine more. I got to be more loyal to them. Like, if maybe I could, donate some money to charity to like help feed needy kids because we care about other people's kids too. But not if my kids are hungry. If my kids are hungry, I got to feed them first. And it's like the same thing, like where you go like, wait, but why is your liberal white lady, why is your first obligation to a group of foreigners ripping off the taxpayers and not to your fellow citizens who are being ripped off? And the other moment in there that I thought was hilarious and infuriating was, did you see the one where the Somali woman starts screaming at him that she's scared of him because he's white?
Yeah, he called her out on that instantly.
I mean, that was like one of the mic drop moments of the whole thing, where it's like, again, like I use these examples, like it's like But you're from Somalia, and your first go-to is that you make me uncomfortable because you're white. Motherfucker, you moved to Minnesota. Minnesota. Are people not familiar with what Minnesota is? The cold place where all the white people live? I'm sorry. It's like me fleeing to Japan and then going back off. Japanese people make me uncomfortable. Well, how can we not just have the minimum expectation that you can't be like that? And the problem is that if you are like that, if you allow that, right, then why wouldn't these people try to rip off the taxpayer any chance they get? Like, I'm not asking for that much. I don't think it's that unreasonable to say that, like, because I'm not, look, the issue with immigration, I'm not like an absolutist immigration restrictionist. Like, I'm not saying the number should be 0 forever. I'm pretty sympathetic to the idea that the number should be damn near close to 0 for a while, because we've just taken in such huge numbers that it's kind of like, hey, until we can sort this out, we can't have people flooding in. There might be exceptions to that, but I'm not even against, I grew up in a country where, the numbers weren't, there were a lot of immigration, but like we had a very small, percentage of different, groups of people. And it kind of worked. It worked relatively well. I had Pakistani immigrants who ran bodegas in my neighborhood and stuff. They were good people. They were hardworking people. They came over and became American. I'm not against, but I just think it's a totally reasonable ask to go, you can't come over here with this attitude that you're racist against the majority of the country that just welcomed you in from a third world nightmare country. Granted, it's a nightmare partially in large part, not only, but in large part because of George W. Bush and Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Okay, fair enough. But still, I don't know if you know me, I don't like those guys very much. So, that sucks, and that's not your fault. But at the same time, the country is the people of the country, not just our corrupt leaders. And you're not saying you hate our corrupt leaders. You're saying you hate this regular guy. And the guy is, look, I mean, whatever the response to this video, this expose is, and maybe people will debunk some of the stuff he showed. I'd be quite interested to see that. But he certainly wasn't approaching her in an intimidating manner at all. The guy couldn't have been more harmless. He's asking questions about how many kids you got inside. That's not aggressive. That's just trying to see, like, are you actually a daycare here?
Great troll by both of them of him being like, I want to put my child here. That's great, because if you're running a business, why wouldn't you have a form? And then good work by that other guy coming in like, wait, you're telling me that there's 90 missing kids? There's supposed to be 90 kids here. Yeah, that really is something. Anyway, it's I guess maybe the thing about this story that's so interesting to me is that there's so many different layers to it. Like there's just the how incompetent the media is, how incompetent the Justice Department is, how incompetent our whole political class is. The whole it kind of demonstrates something about the whole immigration topic, and then also, of course, it's just this great example of like the new media and the legacy media being unable to adapt to it. I mean, even just think about the fact that this guy, I had never heard of this guy before today. I think that's the case for most people who are watching this. I think he got like hundreds of thousands of followers in the last 24 hours or something. And like I said, the video is like over 100 million views on Twitter alone. I'm not even counting the YouTube numbers because I haven't seen that. But this guy is getting the vice presidential candidate and the FBI director, and all these guys have to comment on a story that some guy on the internet just made. It's just like that is so goddamn different than any media landscape environment I've ever seen before.